Shreds of an $2 million check fell onto the shiny marble floor. Victoria Sinclair just destroyed Corey Reynolds' fortune right in front of his little daughter. Corey only wanted to deposit the money to help poor Texas kids and share a warm dinner with his daughter. But the disrespect at Summit Crest Bank started an unfair fight. To protect his dignity, Corey must go on a journey to expose the dark sides of a biased financial system. With false charges, police threats, and dark pressure, how will his talk with the man who holds the bank's fate turn things around? But to understand that shattering moment on the marble floor, we need to go back 9 hours. Back to a small wooden house on the west side of Austin, Texas. The clock read 6:15 in the morning. Corey Reynolds stood at his stove, flipping pancakes in an old cast iron pan. The handle was worn smooth from years of use. Bacon grease popped and hissed behind him. Coffee steam curled up past his shoulder. His daughter Ruby, 7 years old, sat at the kitchen table. She tugged at the laces of her sneakers. They cost $24.99 at the discount store on 5th Street. Outside, a silver 2011 Subaru Outback sat coated in a thin layer of red Texas dust. Corey wore a faded moss-green canvas jacket. The elbows were worn thin. He tucked a loose thread back into Ruby's collar and told her to turn off the tap while she brushed her teeth. Every drop counted, he said. Ruby nodded like she always did. The floorboards under the kitchen table creaked, with a soft groan every time Ruby shifted her weight. A ceiling fan spun overhead, stirring the smell of maple syrup and burnt bacon fat into the warm morning air. Somewhere down the hallway, a pipe knocked twice against the wall, an old habit of this old house. In his jacket pocket, Corey carried a small, cracked leather wallet. It once belonged to his father, a bus mechanic, who worked 40 years without ever missing a shift. The stitching had split along one edge. Corey never fixed it. He liked the reminder of where he came from, tucked close against his ribs every single day. Most people who saw that kitchen would guess Corey worked hard for every dollar he had. They would be wrong about the numbers. His personal accounts at Apex Horizon held more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. He never let show. Not in his house, not in his truck, not in his clothes. Corey wanted Ruby to grow up grateful for small things. He wanted her to know the weight of a dollar. That mattered more to him than any suit hanging in his closet. At 8:30 that morning, his phone buzzed on the counter. A bank alert lit up the screen. A wire transfer had cleared from the early sale of his shares in Verdant Grid, a clean energy startup he had backed 3 years earlier. The number on the screen read $8,214,500 exactly. Corey stared at the screen for a moment. His heart beat a little faster, though his face stayed calm. Then he smiled at Ruby. Today, they would visit Summit Crest Bank, the only bank authorized to process funds this large. He had planned this split months ago. Half the money would go straight into the Texas Education Fund. That was $4,107,250. It would buy books and warm coats for kids across the state. The rest would go into a trust fund for Ruby's future, locked away until she turned 18. Ruby jumped up from her chair. She loved the plan already. After the bank, they would stop at Book People, the old bookstore downtown, to buy the graphic novel set she had begged for. Then dinner. Her birthday dinner at her favorite steakhouse. Corey folded the paper check and slid it into his jacket pocket. He patted the pocket twice, like he always did with anything important. Then he stopped by the front door. Something tightened in his chest. He knew how people looked at a black man in work clothes walking into a marble bank lobby. He had felt those looks before. Careful looks, suspicious looks. For half a second, he thought about changing into the $5,000 tailored suit hanging in the back of his closet. He never wore it. He kept it as a reminder of a world he had chosen to step away from. Ruby tugged at his sleeve, impatient to leave. She had already picked out which graphic novel she wanted first. She talked about it the whole walk to the car, listing every character by name. Corey listened and nodded along, glad the moment had passed. He decided his canvas jacket was good enough for any bank in Texas. He grabbed his truck keys off the hook by the door and checked his pocket once more for the folded check. The morning sun already felt warm through the kitchen window, promising a bright, ordinary Tuesday ahead. But then Ruby looked up at him, her eyes bright and trusting. Corey made his choice. If people needed him to dress a certain way just to earn basic respect, that was their failure, not his. He grabbed his keys and started the car. He had no idea how far that choice would push him before the day was over. At 10:30 that morning, Corey and Ruby walked through the revolving doors of Summit Crest Bank. Bright LED lights bounced off polished white marble floors. Everything gleamed. Everything felt cold and untouchable. Cold air from the vents brushed against Corey's neck. The lobby smelled faintly of fresh flowers and printer ink, two smells that never seemed to belong together. Somewhere behind the counters, a keyboard clicked in a steady rhythm, fast and mechanical. Ruby's sneakers squeaked softly against the polished floor with every step. A few heads turned at the sound. Corey noticed the stairs, but kept his pace slow and even, holding his daughter's small hand a little tighter. They walked up to teller window 4. A young woman named Sarah Jenkins stood behind the counter. Her plastic name tag had a small scratch across the corner. She smiled the moment she saw Ruby. While other tellers whispered and pointed at the dusty Subaru outside, Sarah leaned forward and complimented Ruby's butterfly hair clip. She took the check from Corey with both hands, gently like it mattered. Sarah typed the check number into her computer. Her eyes widened at the amount on the screen. She caught herself fast and kept her voice calm and professional. She told Corey the transfer would need a short verification hold. Standard for large transfers, she explained. It should only take about 9 minutes, Sarah said, glancing at her screen. I appreciate your patience, Mr. Reynolds. Corey thanked her and asked if there was somewhere Ruby could sit while they waited. Sarah pointed toward a small bench near the window, decorated with a bowl of mints and a stack of old magazines. Corey nodded and thanked her. He had nowhere urgent to be. Ruby swung her legs under the counter stool and hummed a tune from her favorite cartoon. She counted the ceiling tiles above her head, all identical white squares stretching toward the back wall. That calm did not last long. An office door opened behind the counter. Heels clicked against the marble floor, sharp and fast. Victoria Sinclair walked out. She wore a Christian Louboutin heel with a bright red sole. A Cartier watch caught the light on her wrist. Victoria's eyes moved down Corey's body. They stopped at his worn canvas jacket. They stopped again at the mud on his work boots. Victoria believed she was protecting something important. In her mind, every rule she enforced kept the bank's reputation safe from fraud and scandal. She had built her whole career on catching things other people missed. Today, her instincts told her something felt wrong, and she trusted those instincts completely. She smoothed the front of her silk blouse and stepped closer, heels striking the floor like small hammers. She reached past Sarah and snatched the check off the counter before the transfer could finish processing. An $8 million check from a man who drives that wreck outside, Victoria said. Her voice carried across the whole lobby. Heads turned. Customers stopped mid-conversation to stare. Corey kept his voice even. He asked her to call the issuing bank to verify the funds. That was standard procedure, and he knew it well. Victoria heard something else. She heard a threat. Her face hardened. Without any warning, she gripped the check with both hands and tore it in half. Then she tore it again and again. 6 torn pieces drifted down and landed on the marble floor. Sarah's mouth fell open. Ruby's small hands flew up to cover her own face. A thin, frightened cry escaped her throat. A woman nearby gasped and pressed a hand to her chest. A man in line dropped his car keys, and the sound of metal on marble seemed to echo forever. Corey did not raise his voice. Not yet. He stood completely still, watching the paper pieces settle on the floor like fallen leaves. Something inside his chest locked tight, like a fist closing around a stone. The muscles along his jaw pulled taut, and a vein rose faintly at his temple. He reached down and lifted his daughter into his arms. Ruby buried her face against his shoulder, her small body shaking. Was this the end of his patience? Or was it only the beginning of something far bigger than one torn check? Victoria reached for the phone at the counter and called internal security. A large guard named Marcus Vance arrived. Within minutes, arms crossed, jaw set hard. Marcus stood well over 6 feet tall. His radio crackled softly on his hip. He planted his boots wide, blocking the path toward the door, and stared at Corey without blinking. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside," Marcus said, his tone flat and rehearsed. Corey did not move. He kept Ruby close and answered in a calm, even voice. "I haven't done anything wrong. I would like to speak with a manager above her." Marcus glanced at Victoria for instructions. She gave a short, sharp nod, and his shoulders squared up even tighter. "Sir, don't make this harder than it needs to be," Marcus said, reaching a hand toward Corey's elbow. Corey stepped back half a pace, keeping Ruby shielded behind him. "Don't touch me, and don't touch my daughter. We haven't broken any law." A small crowd gathered near the entrance now, phones raised, recording every second. Somewhere in the group, a woman whispered that someone should call a lawyer. Victoria pointed at Corey and raised her voice again. She accused him of using his own daughter as a shield for a high-tech fraud scheme. The words landed heavy across the lobby. Sarah stepped out from behind her counter. Her hands trembled, but her voice held steady. She told Victoria the system had already flagged the check as authentic. Victoria cut her off instantly. She warned Sarah she would be fired on the spot if she said one more word. Sarah had worked at Summit Crest Bank for 2 years. She paid her own rent, took the bus to work most mornings, and knew exactly what it felt like to be judged by her clothes. She was not about to stay quiet while a father and his little girl got treated this way. Her manager once warned her that kindness could slow down her career. Sarah never believed that for a second, and today proved her right. She stepped forward again, chin raised. "Miss Sinclair, please. Just let me finish the verification call. It will only take 2 minutes." Victoria spun around, her heels squeaking against the marble. 2 minutes is 2 minutes too long," she snapped. "Get back behind your counter, Sarah, before I write you up." Corey pulled Ruby close against his side. He covered her ear gently with his hand, shielding her from the ugly words filling the room. He looked straight at Victoria. His voice stayed low and steady, but something in it made the guard step back half a pace. "Miss Sinclair," he said, "you are about to make a decision this branch cannot survive." Victoria laughed, a short, sharp sound with no warmth in it. She told Marcus to call the police. Sirens wailed outside 11 minutes later. 2 Austin police officers walked through the glass doors, handcuffs swinging from their belts. Customers around the lobby pulled out their phones and started recording. The doors side shut behind the officers with a soft hydraulic hiss. Boots thudded against marble, heavy and deliberate. The air conditioning hummed louder now, or maybe the room had simply gone that quiet. Whispers spread fast through the crowd. Ugly words. Assumptions built on nothing but a jacket and a used car. Someone near the back muttered a word Corey had heard too many times before in his life. Corey's palms turned damp at his sides. His pulse thudded hard against his collar, though his face stayed still as stone. Victoria pointed her finger straight at Corey. She demanded the officers arrest him for trespassing and financial fraud. One officer asked Corey for identification. He stepped closer, hand near his belt. Ruby wrapped both arms around her father's leg and sobbed into his jeans. Corey reached slowly into his jacket for his wallet. His hands did not shake, though his pulse thundered hard against his ribs. Would a torn check and one woman's pride really be enough to put handcuffs on an innocent father right in front of his little girl? Nearby customers had stopped pretending to mind their own business. A young mother pulled her toddler closer, watching wide-eyed. An older man in a cowboy hat shook his head slowly, muttering that this was not right at all. Victoria stood with her arms crossed, chin lifted, waiting for the officers to finish what she had started. She believed, in that moment, that she was still in control of the room. The officer told Corey to turn around and place his hands behind his back. This was the moment, the lowest point of the whole morning. Corey looked down at Ruby. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, eyes wide with fear she had never known before. He did not fight. He knew any sudden movement would be twisted into something violent on camera. He crouched down instead and spoke softly into her ear. "Look at me, Ruby. Remember this day. The truth is never afraid of the dark." He stood back up straight and turned around, ready for the cold metal of the cuffs. The metal felt cold even before it touched his skin. The officer's radio crackled again, some distant voice calling out an unrelated address. Time seemed to stretch thin, like the whole lobby was holding one long breath. Ruby's crying had gone quiet now, replaced by small, shaky hiccups. She stared at her father's back, too scared to look away. At that exact second, the revolving doors spun hard behind him. A man in a sharp black suit walked in fast, 3 assistants trailing close behind, their dress shoes clicking in quick, uneven bursts. His face was already twisted with alarm. This was Preston Caldwell, the national CEO of Summit Crest Bank. He had arrived in Austin early for a $950 million merger signing with Apex Horizon. Preston had flown in that morning specifically to shake hands with the founder of Apex Horizon himself. He had reviewed Corey's file a dozen times over the past week. He had studied a photograph of Corey's face until he knew it by heart. One of his assistants carried a leather folder stamped with a merger agreement, ready for signatures later that afternoon. Another assistant nearly dropped her tablet when she recognized the man standing near the police officers. Preston froze at the sight in front of him. Torn paper scattered across the floor. Police officers reaching for a father's wrists. A crying child clinging to his leg. He pushed past Victoria without a glance and waved the officer's hands away from Corey. Then Preston Caldwell bowed his head low, right there in the middle of the lobby. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "I'm deeply sorry for this delay. It is an honor to have you here today." Every camera in the room kept recording. Every customer stood frozen in silence. Victoria's face drained of all color. The Cartier watch on her wrist suddenly looked heavier than before. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. How could the man she had just humiliated be the same man holding the fate of the entire merger in his hands? Victoria finally forced words out, stumbling over each one. She said there had been a misunderstanding. She said the man was wearing torn clothes. She said the check looked fake. Preston looked down at the shredded pieces of paper scattered across the marble. Then he looked at Sarah, still standing tall despite her shaking hands. His voice rose, sharp enough to echo off the glass walls. "Quiet, Victoria. Do you have any idea who Mr. Reynolds is? You just destroyed 50 years of this bank's reputation in one single morning." The lobby stayed dead silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to hum louder in the quiet. Somewhere a computer fan clicked, and word, the only proof that time was still moving at all. Victoria's knees buckled slightly. She reached for the counter to steady herself. What would happen now to the woman who once ruled this lobby with a sneer and a raised eyebrow? Corey Reynolds is not just a father with spare cash. He is the founder and CEO of Apex Horizon Wealth Management, a firm managing billions of dollars for major companies across Texas. He was 37 years old, built like the college athlete he once was, and he never once needed to prove that to a stranger. He had built Apex Horizon from a single laptop in a rented office 11 years earlier. He worked nights and weekends, turning down flashy investors who wanted quick profits over honest partnerships. Slowly, his firm grew into one of the most trusted names in Texas finance. Yet he still packed his daughter's lunch every morning himself. Investors who met him for the first time were often surprised by how quiet he was. He never raised his voice in a meeting. He let his results speak instead. That same quiet strength had carried him through today, even when every instinct told him to shout. His plain clothes were never an accident. He wanted his daughter to grow up untouched by the poison of money and status. That choice had nearly cost him his freedom this morning. Now, standing in the wreckage of Victoria's mistake, Corey did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply turned to face her directly. "I don't want an apology," he said. "I want this made right." Preston nodded fast, eager to fix what could not easily be fixed. He offered a replacement check on the spot, along with a formal apology letter from the bank's legal team. Corey shook his head slowly. He asked the officers to file an official report on everything that happened in that lobby. Then he asked for the security footage from camera 4 to be sealed immediately as evidence. Victoria's own security system, the one she trusted completely, had captured every second of her mistake. Preston agreed without hesitation. Corey turned back to Victoria. She had sunk down onto her knees on the cold marble floor, tears streaking down her face, her earlier confidence completely gone. "Please," Victoria whispered, her voice cracking. "I have worked here for 9 years. My whole life is this branch." Corey looked down at her, his expression steady but not unkind. "This morning, you tore up more than paper. You tore up trust. That has a cost." Victoria's hands trembled in her lap. She glanced toward Preston, hoping for some small rescue, but his face stayed hard and unmoved. An officer helped Victoria to her feet, gripping her arm gently but firmly. She did not resist. Her earlier fire had burned itself out completely, leaving only exhaustion behind. Customers near the door lowered their phones, no longer eager to record a woman who looked so small now. "The $950 million merger is off," Corey said, his voice calm, but final, "unless you agree to 3 conditions." The lobby held its breath. First, Victoria would face a public lawsuit for racial discrimination, with every dollar of the settlement going straight into the Children's Education Fund. Second, she would be terminated immediately, and the sealed footage would stand as evidence in court. Third, Sarah Jenkins, the only employee who had tried to stop this from happening, would be promoted on the spot to branch manager. Preston agreed to every single term without blinking. He turned to Victoria and stripped her badge from her blazer himself. 2 officers walked her out, through the same revolving doors she had once ruled like a queen. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, stunned by the sudden shift in her entire life. Then Preston shook her hand in front of the whole lobby, congratulating the new branch manager of Summit Crest Bank, Austin. Applause rippled through the crowd of customers, quiet at first, then louder. A few tellers behind the counter wiped their eyes and smiled at Sarah, proud of her in that single shining moment. Marcus the guard lowered his shoulders and stepped back near the wall. He looked down at his own boots, quiet now, all his earlier confidence gone. Ruby finally let go of her father's leg. She wiped her tears with the back of her small hand and looked up at Sarah with pure gratitude. Corey knelt down beside his daughter. He gently brushed a strand of hair from her damp cheek. "It's over now," he whispered. "You're safe." A fresh check, properly signed and verified, moved through Sarah's system within minutes. The full transfer completed without another delay. $4,107,250 landed safely in the Texas Education Fund account. By 3:45 that afternoon, the Reynolds family Subaru rolled out of the parking lot, engine rattling softly like always. Sunlight poured through the dusty windshield as they pulled onto the highway toward downtown Austin. They stopped first at Book People, the old bookstore Ruby loved so much. The store smelled like old paper and fresh coffee from the little cafe near the entrance. Wooden floors creaked under their feet as they walked between tall, crowded shelves. Ruby picked out the entire graphic novel series she had been saving up for in her head for months. The cashier wrapped the books in brown paper, and Ruby hugged the bundle to her chest the whole ride to dinner. She kept peeking under the paper wrapping at every red light. That evening, at 7:15, they sat down at a small corner table inside the Austin Heart Steakhouse. Warm light glowed from low-hanging lamps above their table. The smell of seared steak and butter drifted from the kitchen. Ruby cut into her steak with careful, proud little strokes, the same way her father had taught her. Between bites, she flipped open her new book and grinned at the pictures inside. A waiter refilled Corey's water glass and complimented Ruby's book choice, unaware of anything that had happened earlier that day. Corey thanked him with a quiet nod, grateful for one ordinary, uneventful moment. She looked up at her father, her eyes bright again, all traces of the morning's fear finally gone. "Dad," she said, "you were so cool today. I want to grow up strong and kind just like you." Corey smiled and gently smoothed down a stray piece of her hair. The real treasure he carried home that day was never the millions of dollars sitting in a bank account. It was the quiet lesson now living inside his daughter's heart. Human dignity is something no torn check and no cruel stranger can ever take away. Outside the restaurant window, the Austin skyline glowed soft orange under the fading summer sun. Inside, a father and his daughter shared a warm meal together, safe, whole, and finally at peace. Sarah Jenkins would spend her first week as branch manager training a new teller at Window 4. She kept a small note taped inside her desk drawer, a reminder to always look people in the eye, no matter what they wore. She also framed a small photo on her new desk. It showed Ruby's butterfly hair clip given to her as a thank you gift the following week. Every time she glanced at it, she remembered why small kindness always mattered more than titles. Victoria Sinclair would spend the following months facing a courtroom instead of a corner office. The lawsuit settlement flowed straight into the same education fund Corey had tried to support that morning. In the end, her own cruelty helped fund the very children she had never once thought to consider. News of the lobby incident spread across Austin within days. Local reporters called it a lesson in humility for the entire banking industry. Summit Crest Bank issued new training programs for every branch across the state, teaching staff to treat every customer with equal respect. Preston Caldwell personally signed off on the new training material. He included Sarah's name on the very first page, calling her an example every employee should follow. He never wanted a morning like that one to repeat itself under his watch again. Corey never wore that tailored suit hanging in his closet. He never needed it. His worth was never stitched into fabric or wrapped around his wrist in gold. Some lessons cost far more than $8 million. This one, Ruby would carry with her for the rest of her life. And somewhere in a small house on the west side of Austin, an old cracked wallet still sat close to a father's heart. It stayed worn thin. It never once broke.